many are there for school, as you should be, right? You're a student athlete first, so you should be there to utilize to get your education. And then, in the additional time you have outside of that, you can develop your craft and hopefully get to a level of proficiency so you can get to the professional level. So then obviously, all right, so let's kind of read through what Ben's got here. So, okay. So Ben said, so I started saying last week that I liked high school soccer better than college soccer because in college it was competitive even against each other. I liked high school soccer better than college soccer because in college it was competitive even against each other. Then I said I thought if I was going to become a coach, I would coach with what I called the deep team mentality. I believe that a couple of my coaches in the past focused too much on creating superstars. In doing so, they sacrificed the performance of the rest of the team. Deep team would focus on getting everyone to their max potential, not just 11 starters and 3 subs. I believe with 100% conviction that getting 33 varsity and junior varsity players to practice 2 hours a day is better than getting the 11 starters to practice 6 hours a day. Okay, if I was coach, I would tell them about my theory of team hours and convince or persuade them, right, or encourage them that they have each given their best effort for the team is what counts. Okay, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I think it's important to say that I envision applying this while coaching a high school team, so less competitive. All right, but how do you predict this playing out in a more competitive environment like college soccer or even on the professional level? Okay, I like that. I like that context. That's a deep question for deep team theory by Benjamin, right? So I think in theoretically, the idea makes sense and it's a sound one and it's solid. Now, the problem and what you run into is the variables of humans, right? And our own selfish desires, our egos, our aspirations, and we each have our own thoughts and belief as to what we believe will get us to where we want to be, right? And what you've got to understand is some members of your team, whether they tell you or don't tell you, believe that the only way they can get to where they're going is if you lose, right? So at the lower ranks, it's easier, in my opinion, to get more people and more players to buy in on the team aspect because there isn't any incentives. There aren't any incentives that are put in place that would really deviate or lead them astray, right? You're not getting paid. You're not really getting that much like adulation. You're not getting like shout outs on social media accounts and able to buy more or less as a result of kind of how you're doing at the high school level, right? At the end of the day, it's easier to develop that deep team mentality because you don't have to deal with as many outside variables and factors, right? Now, as you kind of get to college, you now have a higher percentage of players who happen to be the higher percentage of players at the high school level, right? So they had a mentality of like, even though they're here for the team, they're also developing a mentality for themselves, right? And they put in extra hours or extra work so they can separate themselves from the pack, from the group, right? So now all of those guys and girls are coming together at the collegiate level, and now even though there's the team aspect of it, there's the potential path of going pro. So you want to have your own individual accolades and accomplishments that can set you apart from your competition so that you can elevate and amplify yourself. But not everybody has aspirations to go pro. So from that perspective, many are there for school, as you should be, right? You're a student athlete first, so you should be there to utilize to get your education. And then, in the additional time you have outside of that, you can develop your craft and hopefully get to a level of proficiency so you can get to the professional level. So then obviously some do both, some pick one or the other, but then that also elevates to now at the professional level, you've got a lot of the individuals themselves from everyone around them, even though it's a team sport, right? So now you can kind of see how the ladder gets, you get, as you go up, you get more and more players who've had more and more ambition and more of an ego and more of a selfish look and approach to the game, just as a natural progression up the ranks, right? So your theory in terms of deep team theory, that's the type of theory I subscribe to with regard to when I approached and came into the game. For me, I recognized the need for individual accolades, but I liked and much better enjoyed the experience of the collegiate level, right? It was a brotherhood. It was something that was it was just more enjoyable, right? I preferred that as opposed to kind of the experience that happens, and I've talked about it on previous episodes, like once money's involved and introduced, and people need to provide for their families, people can really change how they justify the decisions they make, for obviously good reasons. So going out broad, because you said this is deep team theory that you're breaking down here, and we're talking about in terms of the approach, right? So that's really what Radical Transparency, the Mental Strength League, the 7-step AmeriCorps process is, right? It's basically how you implement deep team theory in any environment, right? Amateur to professional. Because if we build bottom up, just like I was discussing earlier, where you're only as strong as your weakest link, everyone's heard that, but nobody, in my experience, has been able to break down what that process looks like in practice. And that process looks like the AmeriCorps process, right? And the first 3 steps of that is the 3 S's of self-awareness: self-honesty, self-initiative, self-accountability, right? And if you go to perfectsoccerskills.com/radical transparency, that process is broken down to really understand what radical transparency is the Mental Strength League, and that cultural approach to developing deep team mentality, right? Because I think I align with you in your realization as to what's enjoyable about the game at different levels, and wanting to recreate that as you go up, and your ability to do so. But to pull it off, incentives have to align with the work you're having everybody do. Man, apologies. Let's see if I got my water up here. That becomes increasingly more difficult the higher up you go, because it becomes increasingly more difficult because it becomes harder to showcase why the individual who might be the most talented on the team, or has the access to the most resources and the most support or attention, to be willing to invest that attention, invest those resources, invest that knowledge into the broader team. Because in many instances and cases, it's their ability to prevent their teammates from understanding and their opponent that allows them to be in the position that they're in. But here on the Perfect Soccer platform, right, we want to allow everyone who has the drive and the ambition to hold a position to have the tools, resources, path, and access to be able to do the work necessary to earn that position, and then do the work necessary to maintain that position over time, right? And that's really broken down, again, perfectsoccerskills.com/radical transparency. Ben, I don't know if you've gone through that yet, or if you've seen that, but that may help kind of bring more framework to your approach to it and your personal individual experience, and kind of how you can mold that to tailor your coaching philosophy, modality, ideology, because I think there's something to that, and that's a big reason why I've spent so much time thinking about this and developing this stuff out. So hopefully that answers your question, because that was a detailed, deep one, man. But just like Pogba Jr. said, it'll make for some good content. Let's see. Okay, Larry.